On a crisp autumn morning in 1971, the federal courthouse in Manhattan hummed with its usual activity. But today was different. The marble halls that had witnessed countless legal battles were about to host an unexpected confrontation between two titans in their respective fields, a baseball legend and a federal judge who had never backed down from enforcing his courtroom rules. Mickey Mantle walked through the courthouse security checkpoint, his presence commanding attention without seeking it. The small gold cross that had hung around his neck for the past 20 years caught the morning light as he passed through the metal detector. At 39, Mantle still carried himself with the natural grace of an athlete, though his playing days were behind him. His suit was perfectly tailored, his appearance professional, but it was that simple cross that would soon become the center of an unprecedented legal showdown. Charles Bennett, the long-serving court clerk, noticed the necklace immediately. In his 22 years working for Judge William Peterson, he had seen the judge's strict stance on courtroom decorum lead to numerous confrontations. As Mantle approached the courtroom, Bennett exchanged knowing glances with Maria Rodriguez, the court reporter who had documented countless memorable moments in room 312. Judge Peterson's reputation preceded him throughout the legal community. At 61, he was known for running his courtroom with military precision, his intolerance for even the slightest deviation from proper protocol legendary among New York lawyers. His particular aversion to any religious displays in his courtroom had resulted in several heated exchanges over the years, but never with someone of Mantle's stature. Dick Thompson, Mantle's lawyer, walked beside his client, already sensing the potential for conflict. He had appeared before Judge Peterson numerous times and knew the judge's predilections well. As they approached the courtroom doors, he noticed his client's cross necklace and felt a flutter of concern in his stomach. Inside the courtroom, Tom Walker, the young law clerk, was organizing the day's docket when he looked up to see Mickey Mantle enter. As a lifelong Yankees fan, Walker had to maintain his professional composure, but he couldn't help feeling a surge of excitement at seeing the baseball legend in person. That excitement would soon turn to anxiety as he too noticed the cross necklace and remembered Judge Peterson's strict rules. James Sullivan, the opposing counsel representing Major League Baseball, was already seated at his table when Mantle entered. He had been prepared to argue about contract interpretations and player rights, but what was about to unfold would overshadow any planned legal arguments. Peggy Anderson, watching from her administrative office through the glass partition, saw Judge Peterson reviewing some papers in his chambers. She had worked in the courthouse long enough to recognize when the elements of a perfect storm were aligning. The judge's morning coffee had been late, his favorite parking spot had been taken, and now a celebrated athlete was about to enter his courtroom wearing the very thing he had banned countless times before. As Mantle and Thompson took their seats at the defendant's table, Maria Rodriguez prepared her stenography machine, sensing that today's proceedings might require particular attention to detail. She had documented thousands of cases, but something in the air told her this one would be different. Judge Peterson emerged from his chambers precisely at 9 a.m., his black robe perfectly pressed, his demeanor stern as always. The bailiff called the court to order, and as everyone rose, the judge's eyes swept the courtroom with their usual scrutiny. The moment his gaze fell on Mantle's cross necklace, a subtle but noticeable tightening of his jaw indicated the brewing storm. "Mr. Mantle," Judge Peterson's voice cut through the courtroom silence, "I notice you're wearing a religious symbol in my courtroom." The words were measured but carried an unmistakable edge. "You'll need to remove it before we proceed." The baseball legend's response was calm and respectful, but firm. "Your Honor, this cross has been with me through every major moment of my career. It's not just a religious symbol to me, it's a part of who I am." The courtroom air grew thick with tension. Dick Thompson shifted slightly in his chair, his legal mind already racing through precedents and constitutional arguments. James Sullivan watched with growing interest, temporarily forgetting about the contract dispute they were supposed to be arguing. Judge Peterson's face darkened slightly. "Mr. Mantle, perhaps your celebrity status has led you to believe that rules can be bent for your convenience. In this courtroom, everyone is equal under the law, and my rules about religious displays apply to everyone, regardless of their fame or achievements." What happened next would become legendary in legal circles. Instead of backing down or becoming confrontational, Mantle reached into his briefcase and pulled out a leather-bound copy of the United States Constitution. The move was so unexpected that even his own lawyer looked surprised. "Your Honor," Mantle began, his voice carrying the same quiet confidence that had made him a leader in the Yankees clubhouse, "I've spent some time studying the law since my retirement. Would you allow me to present a legal argument regarding your request?" The judge's eyebrows rose slightly, a mix of surprise and skepticism crossing his face. Here was Mickey Mantle, known for his towering home runs and blazing speed on the base paths, offering to present a legal argument in federal court. The gallery of attorneys and court staff held their collective breath. Tom Walker, from his clerk's position, watched in fascination as the baseball legend opened the Constitution to a clearly marked page. Maria Rodriguez's fingers hovered over her stenography machine, ready to record what was promising to be an extraordinary exchange. Charles Bennett, who had seen every kind of legal argument in this courtroom, found himself leaning forward slightly, intrigued by this unexpected turn of events. Peggy Anderson had abandoned any pretense of working at her desk, her eyes fixed on the unfolding scene through the glass partition. "Your Honor," Mantle continued, "I believe asking me to remove this cross violates both the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This isn't about seeking special treatment, it's about protecting fundamental constitutional rights." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Judge Peterson, known for his quick replies and sharp rebukes, found himself momentarily speechless. Here was Mickey Mantle, the Commerce Comet, citing constitutional law in his courtroom. The judge's expression shifted from surprise to genuine interest, though he maintained his stern demeanor. Dick Thompson watched his client with newfound admiration. In all his years of practicing law, he had never seen an athlete handle a legal confrontation with such poise and unexpected expertise. James Sullivan, despite representing the opposing side in the original case, found himself nodding appreciatively at Mantle's approach. As the morning sun streamed through the high courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the ornate courtroom, a simple cross necklace had set the stage for an extraordinary demonstration of how knowledge and dignity could transform a confrontation into a teaching moment. The baseball legend who had faced down the greatest pitchers of his era was about to show that his intelligence and preparation extended far beyond the diamond. Maria Rodriguez's fingers flew across her stenography machine, knowing that every word of this exchange would be reviewed and studied by legal scholars. Tom Walker made mental notes, already imagining how this story would be told and retold in law schools and baseball clubhouses alike. The tension in the courtroom had transformed from confrontational to anticipatory. Everyone present sensed that they were about to witness something remarkable, a moment when America's favorite pastime would intersect with constitutional law in a way that no one had expected. Judge William Peterson had faced down countless attorneys in his courtroom, but never had he encountered anything quite like this. Mickey Mantle, the legendary Yankee slugger, stood before him with a well-worn copy of the Constitution in his hands and a quiet confidence that seemed to transcend his baseball fame. The morning light streaming through the high windows cast a subtle glow on the gold cross that had sparked this unprecedented confrontation. "Your Honor," Mantle continued, his voice carrying the same steady rhythm that had made him a natural leader in the Yankees clubhouse, "I've prepared a three-part argument regarding your request to remove my cross. Would you allow me to present it?" The judge, his initial irritation now tempered by genuine curiosity, nodded slowly. "Proceed, Mr. Mantle. But remember, this is a court of law, not a baseball diamond." Dick Thompson watched his client with a mixture of pride and amazement. In all their preparations for today's contract dispute, this particular legal battle had never been discussed. Yet here was Mickey Mantle, about to present a constitutional argument that would have impressed any law school professor. "First, Your Honor," Mantle began, turning to a carefully marked page in his Constitution, "the Free Exercise Clause protects not just our right to believe, but to express those beliefs in a manner that doesn't disrupt public order. This cross has been with me through every game, every contract negotiation, and every public appearance. It's a personal expression of faith, not a disruption to court proceedings." Maria Rodriguez's fingers flew across her stenography machine, capturing every word of this extraordinary moment. In her 18 years as a court reporter, she had never seen an athlete transform into a constitutional scholar before her eyes. Tom Walker, the young law clerk, was scribbling notes furiously, knowing he was witnessing something that would be discussed in legal circles for years to come. James Sullivan, the MLB's counsel, found himself setting aside his case notes to listen more intently. The contract dispute that had brought them all here seemed suddenly secondary to the impromptu constitutional law seminar being delivered by one of baseball's greatest players. Secondly, Mantle continued, his confidence growing with each word, the Establishment Clause prevents the government from either promoting or inhibiting religious expression. By singling out religious symbols for removal while allowing other personal items, the court risks crossing that very line it seeks to protect. Charles Bennett, who had seen every kind of legal argument in this courtroom, noticed how the other attorneys present had stopped shuffling papers or checking their watches. Every eye was fixed on the unexpected legal scholar at the defendant's table. Even Peggy Anderson had abandoned any pretense of administrative work, watching the scene unfold through the glass partition with rapt attention. Judge Peterson leaned forward slightly, his stern expression now showing genuine engagement. "And your third point, Mr. Mantle?" "The third point, Your Honor, addresses the concept of reasonable accommodation," Mantle replied, turning to another marked page. "Courts have consistently held that unless a religious expression causes actual disruption or impairs the administration of justice, there's a duty to accommodate it. This small cross hasn't disrupted any proceedings, nor has it interfered with the court's ability to administer justice fairly." The judge's chamber's clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Dick Thompson felt a surge of professional admiration for his client. In 15 years of practicing law, he had never seen a non-lawyer present such a cogent constitutional argument. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Mantle added, his voice carrying a note of personal conviction, "this cross represents more than just religious belief to me. It's a reminder of the values that shaped my career: humility, perseverance, and respect for something greater than ourselves. These are values that align perfectly with the dignity of this court." Maria Rodriguez glanced up from her stenography machine to see several veteran attorneys in the gallery nodding appreciatively. The baseball legend had somehow managed to transform a potential confrontation into a masterclass in constitutional rights and professional dignity. Judge Peterson sat back in his chair, studying the man before him with new eyes. The same qualities that had made Mickey Mantle a baseball legend, preparation, focus, and grace under pressure, were now on display in an entirely different arena. "Mr. Mantle," the judge finally spoke, his tone noticeably softer than before, "where did you acquire this knowledge of constitutional law?" A small smile crossed Mantle's face. "Your Honor, when I retired from baseball, I realized that being an athlete didn't mean I had to stop learning. I've spent the last few years studying law in my spare time, particularly focusing on constitutional rights. Just because a man can hit a baseball doesn't mean he can't also understand the law." Tom Walker, from his clerk's position, noticed how this response seemed to resonate with everyone in the courtroom. It was a powerful reminder that people shouldn't be limited by others' perceptions of them. The gallery had grown larger as word spread through the courthouse about what was unfolding in room 312. Young lawyers and clerks stood at the back, watching as one of baseball's greatest players demonstrated that intellectual achievement knows no professional boundaries. James Sullivan found himself remembering all the times he had dismissed athletes as mere entertainers. Mantle's precise legal argument and professional demeanor had shattered those preconceptions completely. The contract dispute they were supposed to be arguing seemed almost trivial compared to the larger lesson being taught. "Your Honor," Mantle continued, "I understand and respect the need for courtroom decorum. But I believe that true respect for the law includes protecting the very rights it was designed to safeguard. This cross represents both my faith and my commitment to those principles." Dick Thompson watched as his client's words seemed to settle over the courtroom like a quiet truth. The initial tension had transformed into something else entirely, a shared appreciation for the unexpected ways wisdom can manifest itself. Charles Bennett, organizing papers at his desk, couldn't help but think about how this story would be told and retold in the courthouse for years to come. not just as an amusing anecdote about a baseball player citing constitutional law, but as a reminder that dignity and knowledge often come from unexpected sources. Judge Peterson, known throughout the legal community for his unwavering adherence to rules, found himself in an unusual position. The very qualities he valued most, preparation, respect for the law, and clear reasoning, were being demonstrated by someone he had initially dismissed as just another celebrity seeking special treatment. Maria Rodriguez's fingers hadn't stopped moving throughout Mantle's presentation, knowing that every word needed to be preserved. This transcript would likely find its way into law school classrooms and legal journals, a testament to the power of breaking preconceptions. Peggy Anderson, still watching through the glass partition, saw something in Judge Peterson's expression that she had rarely witnessed in her 15 years at the courthouse: the look of a man whose deeply held convictions were being challenged not by force, but by reason and dignity. The morning sun had climbed higher now, its light filling the courtroom with a warm glow that seemed to mirror the intellectual illumination taking place. The simple gold cross that had sparked this confrontation caught the light occasionally, a quiet reminder of how something small could lead to something profound. As Mantle concluded his argument, the courtroom remained silent, everyone present sensing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. It wasn't just about a baseball player defending his right to wear a cross. It was about the unexpected ways knowledge and dignity could bridge the gap between different worlds. Judge Peterson's response would determine more than just whether Mickey Mantle could wear his cross in court. It would reveal whether wisdom could triumph over rigid adherence to rules, whether respect could be earned across the boundaries of profession and perception. The entire courtroom waited, knowing they were part of a moment that would be remembered long after the original case was forgotten. Judge William Peterson's courtroom remained silent as he contemplated Mickey Mantle's constitutional argument. The seasoned judge, who had presided over thousands of cases in his career, found himself in an unprecedented situation. Before him stood not just a baseball legend, but a man who had demonstrated a deep understanding of constitutional law that would have impressed even the most experienced attorneys. "Mr. Mantle," Judge Peterson finally spoke, his voice carrying a tone that his regular courtroom attendees had never heard before. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've heard countless constitutional arguments. But few have been presented with such clarity and personal conviction." He paused, removing his reading glasses and placing them carefully on the bench before him. Dick Thompson watched the exchange with growing amazement. In all his years of practicing law, he had never seen Judge Peterson take such a measured approach to being challenged. The judge was known for his swift and often harsh responses to any questioning of his courtroom rules, yet here he was, genuinely considering Mantle's argument. Maria Rodriguez's fingers hovered over her stenography machine, knowing that what came next would be quoted in legal textbooks and sports biographies alike. The morning sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the courtroom floor, adding a dramatic backdrop to this historic moment. "Your argument regarding the free exercise clause," the judge continued, "shows a sophisticated understanding of constitutional principles that many practicing attorneys would do well to emulate." He leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "But it's your point about reasonable accommodation that particularly interests me." The gallery of attorneys and court staff listened intently as Judge Peterson began to analyze Mantle's argument point by point. James Sullivan, the MLB's counsel, found himself taking notes, despite this having nothing to do with the contract dispute they were supposed to be arguing. "You've raised an interesting question about the balance between maintaining courtroom decorum and protecting individual religious expression," the judge mused. "A balance that, I must admit, I may have been too rigid in interpreting." Tom Walker, from his clerk's position, noticed how several veteran attorneys exchanged surprised glances. Judge Peterson was known for many things, but admitting to possible rigidity in his interpretations was not one of them. Charles Bennett, who had served as court clerk through countless controversial rulings, recognized the significance of this moment. The judge wasn't just responding to a legal argument, he was demonstrating the very essence of judicial wisdom, the ability to reconsider long-held positions when presented with compelling reasoning. "However," Judge Peterson continued, his tone firming slightly, "I'm curious about something, Mr. Mantle. When did you begin this study of constitutional law, and what prompted it?" Mickey Mantle's response carried the same quiet confidence that had characterized his entire presentation. Your Honor, during my playing days, I saw how rules and regulations could shape people's lives. Whether it was baseball's reserve clause or broader social issues, I realized that understanding the law was crucial to understanding justice. After retiring, I dedicated myself to studying the Constitution, particularly the Bill of Rights. I wanted to understand the rules that govern not just games, but lives. Peggy Anderson, still watching through the glass partition, saw several younger attorneys in the gallery nodding appreciatively. It was a powerful reminder that intellectual growth knows no professional boundaries. The judge sat back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. Mr. Mantle, you've done more than present a legal argument here today. You've reminded this court that wisdom and knowledge can come from unexpected sources, and that our preconceptions about people can blind us to their true capabilities. Maria Rodriguez's fingers flew across her stenography machine, capturing every word of what was becoming a landmark moment in both legal and sports history. The tension that had filled the courtroom earlier had transformed into something else entirely, a shared appreciation for the power of reasoned discourse and lifelong learning. Furthermore, Judge Peterson continued, your point about the intersection of personal faith and professional conduct is well taken. The very principles this court seeks to uphold, justice, dignity, and respect for individual rights, are not diminished by the presence of personal religious expression that, as you correctly noted, causes no disruption to proceedings. Dick Thompson felt a surge of pride in his client. The baseball legend had accomplished something remarkable. He had caused one of the most rigid judges in the federal court system to publicly reconsider his position, and he had done it with grace and intelligence rather than confrontation or celebrity status. I am therefore making a modification to my courtroom rules, the judge announced, his voice carrying the formal tone of an official ruling. Personal religious symbols, worn in a manner that does not disrupt proceedings or draw undue attention, will no longer be prohibited in this courtroom. The significance of this announcement rippled through the gathered crowd. Judge Peterson hadn't simply made an exception for Mantle. He had revised a long-standing rule based on the strength of a constitutional argument. James Sullivan leaned over to his assistant, whispering, I think we just witnessed history, and it had nothing to do with baseball. The young attorney nodded, still scribbling notes about the exchange they had just witnessed. Mr. Mantle, the judge continued, you've demonstrated today that expertise in one field doesn't preclude wisdom in another. Your thoughtful approach to this issue, grounded in both personal conviction and legal scholarship, serves as an example to everyone in this courtroom. Tom Walker noticed how the other clerks and young attorneys in the gallery were paying rapt attention. This wasn't just about a rule change regarding religious symbols. It was a masterclass in how to challenge authority respectfully and effectively. However, Judge Peterson added, a slight smile touching his usually stern features, I trust you're equally well prepared for the contract dispute we're actually here to discuss today? A quiet chuckle rippled through the courtroom as Mantle smiled and patted his briefcase. Yes, Your Honor. I believe in being prepared for every aspect of the game, whether it's on the field or in the courtroom. Charles Bennett, organizing the day's dockets, couldn't help but reflect on how this morning had transformed from a potential confrontation into something approaching a legal seminar. The baseball legend had shown that true authority comes not from rigid enforcement of rules, but from the wisdom to know when those rules need to be reconsidered. The morning sun now filled the courtroom completely, its warm light seeming to underscore the illumination that had taken place. The small gold cross around Mantle's neck caught the light occasionally, no longer a point of contention but a symbol of how principle and reason could bridge even the widest gaps in understanding. As the court prepared to move on to the actual case at hand, Maria Rodriguez made one final note in her transcript. Years later, when this transcript would be studied in law schools and cited in legal journals, this moment would be seen as more than just an interesting anecdote about a baseball player in court. It would be recognized as a powerful reminder that justice is best served when wisdom and humility meet, when rules are guided by reason rather than rigidity, and when preconceptions give way to understanding. The gallery began to settle back into their seats, preparing for the contract dispute that had originally brought them all together. But everyone present knew they had witnessed something far more significant than a typical legal proceeding. They had seen how knowledge, dignity, and respect could transform a confrontation into a moment of shared growth and understanding. The story of Mickey Mantle's unexpected legal triumph in Judge Peterson's courtroom spread through the legal community like wildfire. 6 months later, the marble halls of the New York Bar Association were filled with distinguished guests for what had become known as the Cross and Constitution Lecture Series, inspired by that remarkable morning in federal court. Mickey Mantle stood at the podium, his gold cross catching the light just as it had that day in court. The audience before him included not just legal professionals, but law students, sports figures, and journalists, all eager to hear firsthand about the day a baseball legend had transformed a courtroom confrontation into a lesson about justice and dignity. Judge William Peterson sat in the front row, a position that surprised many who knew his usual reluctance to attend public events. But the events of that morning had affected him profoundly, leading to subtle but significant changes in his approach to the bench. His presence today was a testament to how a single moment of wisdom could ripple outward, touching countless lives. "Baseball taught me about rules," Mantle began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it had in court that day. "But it also taught me that understanding why rules exist is just as important as following them. That's what led me to study constitutional law, not to challenge authority, but to understand the principles behind it." Dick Thompson, sitting nearby, remembered how that morning had changed his own approach to legal practice. The sight of his client calmly presenting constitutional arguments had reminded him that wisdom often comes from unexpected sources. His firm now regularly invited non-legal professionals to share their perspectives on justice and fairness. Maria Rodriguez had provided copies of her transcript to law schools across the country, where the exchange between Mantle and Judge Peterson had become a case study in effective legal argumentation and judicial wisdom. The transcript revealed not just what was said, but captured the transformation of an entire courtroom's understanding of justice and dignity. What happened that morning wasn't just about a cross or a courtroom rule, Mantle continued, addressing the packed hall. It was about the importance of approaching conflict with knowledge and respect rather than confrontation. It was about showing that learning doesn't end when we achieve success in one field. James Sullivan, who had been present that day representing the MLB, had fundamentally changed his approach to working with athletes after witnessing Mantle's display of legal acumen. His law firm now offered educational programs for professional athletes, encouraging them to understand the legal principles that govern their careers. Tom Walker, who had since become a full-fledged attorney, often shared the story with young lawyers as an example of how true legal wisdom sometimes comes from outside the traditional legal community. "I learned more about constitutional law from Mickey Mantle that morning than I did in many of my law school classes," he would say. Charles Bennett, still serving as court clerk, had noticed a subtle but significant change in Judge Peterson's courtroom since that day. The judge's once rigid adherence to rules had been tempered by a new willingness to consider the reasoning behind challenges to his authority. The atmosphere in room 312 had become one of mutual respect rather than mere compliance. "The Constitution," Mantle explained to his audience, "is like a playbook for democracy. Just as every player needs to understand the rules of the game, every citizen should understand the principles that protect their rights. That's why I spent those years studying, not to become a lawyer, but to be a better citizen." Peggy Anderson, who had witnessed the entire exchange through her office window, had since created a courthouse program encouraging staff to pursue education in fields outside their immediate expertise. She often cited Mantle's example as proof that knowledge knows no professional boundaries. Judge Peterson himself had become an advocate for what he called reasonable wisdom in judicial practice. His speech at the annual judicial conference had focused on the importance of balancing rigid rule enforcement with understanding and accommodation. "Sometimes," he had said, "the greatest wisdom comes from being willing to reconsider our most firmly held positions." The impact of that morning continued to resonate through both the legal and sports communities. Law schools had added modules about the intersection of sports and law, using the Mantle incident as a prime example of how different worlds of expertise could inform each other. Sports organizations had begun encouraging players to understand the legal principles that affected their careers. That morning in court taught me something important, Mantle shared with his attentive audience. It showed me that respect isn't about power or position, it's about understanding and wisdom. Judge Peterson demonstrated true judicial wisdom by being willing to consider a perspective he hadn't expected to encounter in his courtroom. The young law students in the audience listened intently as Mantle explained how he had prepared for that morning, studying constitutional law with the same dedication he had once applied to studying pitchers' tendencies. His message about lifetime learning and the importance of understanding the principles behind rules resonated deeply. The cross I wear, Mantle continued, touching the small gold symbol that had sparked the entire incident, represents faith to me. But that morning, it became something more, a symbol of how standing up for our beliefs should be done with knowledge and dignity rather than confrontation and anger. The legal community had evolved in subtle but significant ways since that morning. Judges across the country had begun reconsidering rigid courtroom rules, looking for ways to balance decorum with reasonable accommodation. The Mantle Standard, as some had begun calling it, emphasized the importance of understanding the reasoning behind challenges to authority. The sports world, too, had been affected. Athletes increasingly sought to understand the legal principles that governed their profession. Several sports organizations had established educational programs encouraging players to study law, economics, and other fields that affected their careers and lives. What I remember most about that morning, Judge Peterson shared when invited to speak, wasn't the legal argument itself, though it was impressively presented. What I remember was the reminder that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, and that true justice requires us to be open to hearing it. The lecture series had become a regular event, bringing together legal professionals, athletes, and educators to discuss the intersection of sports, law, and justice. It served as a reminder that knowledge and expertise shouldn't be confined to traditional boundaries. The lesson I hope people take from that morning, Mantle concluded, is that standing up for our beliefs doesn't require confrontation. It requires understanding, preparation, and respect for the principles involved. Whether we're on a baseball field or in a courtroom, the rules that govern us are meant to protect and guide, not to divide and restrict. As the applause filled the hall, Judge Peterson stood to shake Mantle's hand, recreating a moment that had become symbolic of how wisdom and respect could bridge any gap. The photograph of that handshake would hang in courthouses and law schools across the country, a reminder that justice is best served when authority meets wisdom with an open mind. The story of the baseball legend and the federal judge had become more than just an interesting anecdote. It had become a testament to the power of lifetime learning, the importance of approaching conflict with knowledge and respect, and the understanding that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources. As Mickey Mantle left the podium that evening, his cross catching the light one final time, he had demonstrated once again that the greatest victories often come not from confrontation, but from the courage to stand up for our beliefs with dignity, knowledge, and respect for the principles that govern us all.